Hey, we have a Union Gap Police Chief, Mr. Greg Cobb, in the house this morning, and our Yakima County Sheriff, Mr. Bob Udell. Good morning, gentlemen. Thanks for coming in.
Good morning.
Absolutely. Good morning, you guys.
Talking about the 2021 Washington legislative session.
We wish you were here under different circumstances.
Yeah, man.
Because
yeah,
it's not fun to see you guys with one hand tied behind your back. You know,
Jeez,
and that's
really.
I guess kind of.
We're not appreciating that either.
Yeah, and you're not far from the truth on that.
Yeah,
There's
that's kinda what it feels like.
significant changes. 1310, I think, is gonna have the biggest impact on the community. That's where they're gonna, unfortunately, see times where law enforcement can't respond, or unfortunately, again, times where law enforcement has to leave the scene before things are brought to a proper conclusion.
I just can't even believe you're even saying that, but that's just that's the bottom line here. That's the reality of it, right? So, give us an example. Either one of you, give us an example as to where you might have to leave the scene.
Say, for example, you come in here and I've got Lance in a chokehold as usual, and you see that. And you go, nothing to see here.
Exactly. Take another drink of coffee and we all move on.
That's right. All right. That
As
might
long
not,
as he's not purple, everybody's happy.
that might not be the best example.
So a good example, a general rule that I think that we're going to have to live by is exactly what the new law says, which
Letter
is
of the law, isn't it?
Which is, if there's no crime occurring and there's no imminent threat to another person, then we have to leave, especially if de-escalation tactics fail. So, a suicidal subject. If they're in their house and they're a suicidal subject and the only person they're threatening is themselves, yeah, we have to leave.
Well, you wouldn't come anyway, right? I mean, you wouldn't.
In some instances, we may not come.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
you may have an officer that tries to make contact with that person on the phone and see if they can, use some de-escalation tactics and maybe offer them they will offer them some assistance of a DCR and whatnot if they come out of the house and willingly go get help.
Sure.
But absent a circumstance like that, we're leaving.
Let me give you an example from, say, 6 weeks ago at Lance Stormy. If they got a phone call, say dispatch got a phone call, somebody going, hey, help, we got a guy with a gun here and he's going to commit suicide, and we're all freaked out. You might respond to that, right? I mean, that's something that you would go to, and you'd get there and you talk to the guy and he goes, look, I got nothing to do with them. I've had it and I'm checking out. Theoretically, you got to let him check out, right?
Correct.
Right. It's not suicide. It's not a crime. So if he's in the house and no one else is threatened, say the family's outside with us,
right,
and he's inside with a gun, and the family says, "Go get him," we're not going to go get him.
Now, and the other thing is, what is an imminent threat to somebody else? Now, that puts a judgment call back on you guys again. And I understand that a lot of this is to take away judgment calls, it seems like, because the legislators don't necessarily trust the judgment calls that have been made historically, and that's why we need to have this kind of stuff. But it's still on you to determine imminent threat, isn't it?
Correct. And an imminent threat could be defined as if there's no intervention, whatever was going to occur is going to occur in the future, right? Probably the near future. So imminent threat. Suspect has a gun in his waistband, all right, and he's making some verbal threats. There's an imminent threat there versus immediate threat, which is the hands going to the gun and the gun's coming out. So imminent versus immediate. Unfortunately, later on in 1310, they use immediate to define imminent.
Oh, boy.
So very poorly worded legislation on this that causes a lot of confusion.
And will have to be sorted out going through the courts probably, and at the cost to officers based on did they get the judgment right that wasn't defined for them or what have you, right? I mean, it really exposes your guys, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And we're scared that the way this is going to get resolved is there's going to be a deputy or officer offered up as a test case.
Yeah.
But we don't want to have that happen. And a fix could not happen until the next legislative session. And that's quite a ways away.
Yeah.
I mean, realistically, there's these changes we are going to have to live with as written for a period of time.
And because of that, it forces sheriffs and police chiefs to take a very black and white view of the wording in these new laws.
Yeah.
Some of the legislators have already come out when they've heard, especially sheriffs and police chiefs on the west side, say, hey, this is going to happen. We're no longer going to be able to go to these types of calls. And there's some pushback from the legislators over there saying, hey, well, that's not what we intended. Well, words matter. You put those words on a piece of paper and then had them signed by the governor, which makes it law. And we have to operate within the law. So your intent is actually immaterial. It's what does the law say?
Yeah.
And the sheriff and Chief Murray and myself and 7 other chiefs in Yakima County that signed that press release, we have determined that we're not going to allow our officers to be the sacrificial lamb, right? We don't want our officers and deputies to make that case law. So we have to take a very black and white approach to what the new law says.
Yeah, you've tied our hands. Now don't
Yeah.
squawk if we can't get there because our hands are tied.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You're the one
and
that
there's a
did-
very real threat to the cops because part of these new laws involves some sections on decertification of officers that they
Yeah.
feel aren't following the law. And so their careers are on the line. And what's tough is we can make a mistake, but that mistake can be fatal to their career.
Sure.
So it's a big deal.
Are any of your deputies, any of your officers, are they talking about this? Are they concerned about their jobs? I mean, that's got to be a real
it's
possibility.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
topic number one.
All right, let me ask you about a domestic violence situation because I can remember back when the laws was changed that if you go out there, somebody's got to go to jail, that sort of thing. If it looks like things are going on, what about now? Does this impact judgments to be made at a domestic situation?
I think it does. There are some agencies that are contemplating not even responding to verbal domestics. So a lot of times we get that call that an argument, someone says, hey, I think something's going on. And is it physical? We don't know. We think we just hear a bunch of yelling. Mm-hmm. Well, the problem is some agencies are determining that, well, that's too much of a risk to go because there isn't probable cause of a
Right.
crime. And yelling doesn't necessarily equal imminent threat.
Right.
So do we even go to those types of calls where now we typically go to those calls and we handle things at a low level?
You can
Right.
de-escalate just by showing up and saying, "Hey, is everybody okay here? What's going on?" And they go,
Exactly.
"Oh,
right.
You
wow,
nailed it.
We didn't realize we were to the
Yeah.
level of police being involved. Sorry, bye-bye, right? Doesn't that happen more often than not?
More often
Yeah.
than not.
Absolutely.
And now we may be in a position to where instead of being proactive, we have to be reactive
Yeah.
and wait for something bad to happen before we go.
Yeah.
So, I mean, are you going to have like an attorney sitting there to ask every time on a call? I mean, how are you going to make these heavy lawful decisions on every call? You got to leave it up to your officers and hope they don't make a bad decision, right? I mean, other than that, you place
Absolutely.
an attorney at the office or
and,
something.
And look
right?
at how in the sheriff's office, we don't have very many deputies out there, and they are stretched out
Yeah.
all over thousands of square miles. And so those guys and gals have to make these decisions themselves alone. And a lot of times in law enforcement, we don't have time to go back to our car and think about it, call a sergeant, wonder, let me look at that law again, let me
Yeah.
pull it up. It happens now.
Yeah.
And so these guys and gals have got to be versed on this stuff before they. We're working on it now. We got training going on. I know Chief Cobb's doing, internally in his agency. Now, the one of the major problems with this is there's no clear direction or clarification from the state. It's not like there's an organization saying, okay, this is what you guys are going to do.
Right.
It's left up. Here's the new laws. Figure it out.
Yeah.
Let me just take you back a couple of years out of Ferguson. It was called the Ferguson effect, and we saw it play out in that a lot of officers, rather than run the risk, kind of stood back from things. This is almost like the Ferguson effect now turned into the law.
Well, yeah, it's definitely now codified, right?
Yeah.
It's and what the sheriff was just talking about in terms of figuring this stuff out. So this law takes effect Saturday night, Sunday morning. But the Attorney General has a year to issue his interpretation of this law. So we have to operate blindly for 11 months. And it's horribly written. It sets officers up for failure. And now they don't have a choice. Sheriff was talking about things happening like right now. Well, we're telling our people, before you even go to the scene, slow down. Be patient. Wait. Use your technology the best you can to see if you can determine if there's probable cause or imminent threat before you even arrive on scene. So at least you know, once you're on scene, you know what your legal standing is. Because if you go into a scene to investigate what your legal standing might be, it's too late. You're gonna get swept up in this.
Sure.
So it's pull over, stop, call the reporting party, look in our database to see who the players might be in these calls as we go to them, and try to determine what exactly you're dealing with right now when you get there. So minutes count, and unfortunately our response times to these calls are going to be significantly delayed because officers just can't go in there and figure it out as they go. They got to know where they stand the minute they arrive.
You know, not only this situation, but vehicle pursuits as well. Talk to us a little bit about that, right? I mean, you've got a report of a robbery at a local store. A red car, he just left in a red car. That's what you got.
You've heard my example, haven't you?
No, I
But that's exactly it.
the red car.
I read it.
Yeah, Dave. Yeah, Dave was talking about it this
So deputies
morning.
and police officers are responding to this robbery, and the witnesses say there was a red car, dirty red car, headed back towards town. Well, the deputy's coming in, and he comes across a dirty red car 2 miles from the scene, and he says, that's probably it. He turns on that car, he gets up behind it, hits his lights, and the car takes off. Now, in the old days, we would go after that. Reasonable suspicion, a hunch, the facts seem to support that car is likely involved. And they're running right
they're
there.
running,
That's another key. But now we can't pursue unless we have probable cause. And that's that higher level, that's evidence-based, that Chief Cobb talked about. And that officer and deputy's thinking, I can't articulate that I know, more likely than not, that's the driver is involved in that crime. We let him go.
Unless there's money blown out the window from the robbery, or the stolen TV cord is out the side and flapping on the side of the car.
But usually we don't have that much.
Yeah.
And sometimes what we call great police work is built on a hunch.
Jeez.
And they're taking that away.
Right. Observation based on years of experience, based on, collective wisdom from the department.
Yeah.
You can make those hunches.
Training and experience and the totality of the circumstances lead a reasonable officer to believe that the fact that that vehicle matches a physical description of a vehicle that just committed a felony and we're in close proximity in time and distance to where that crime occurred, that means we could chase and we could take a bad guy off the street. Now, that's all out the window.
God.
So, Greg, the point of this today is an informational moment in general, but you really are sending out an alert to the community and saying, look, sorry, Yakima County, Union Gap, whatever, please understand that it's not that there's a new sheriff in town, it's that there's new rules the sheriff has to play by and the chief has to play by. And if your frustration level is there, let me direct you to the legislature for your complaints and not our office, because that's where it's coming from, and you're going to need to talk to them and put the pressure there, because until then we're following the rules of the law so that we're not on the other side of the bars, right?
Yeah, so we're I don't know any sheriff or any police chief or any officer or deputy that looked at the vast majority of House Bill 1310, vast majority of 1054, and looked at that as a good thing. All right, there's real impacts to the community on this, and it's the legislature believes that they don't want law enforcement to be the default agency to handle every crisis. And I would agree with them, especially on the mental health stuff, and I'm pretty sure the sheriff would too, that our people are, if they're in mental crisis, waiting for them to commit a crime and locking them up in jail is not the best way to help them. And so we've adapted to that through a lot of de-escalation training. There are components of I-940 that are good, and we were just starting to be able to train people up and implement those, and then the carpet's pulled out from underneath us. We embedded DCRs, designated crisis responders
Yeah.
with officers so that the right people were at the scene at the right time, and we could support the DCRs by force if necessary, if
Right.
they determined that somebody was gravely disabled and needed to be taken in. Well, those days are over. And so, yeah, we're not here crying in our own milk here that hey, sorry, we're not coming. It's you have to know, the public has to know these impacts so that they can prepare accordingly too.
Yeah, I mean, because I'm not going to know whether I'm just going to call 911. I'm
Right.
not going to be able to like, oh, I wonder if this is a legal situation that I can call the cops on.
You know,
No, I
this,
mean,
our responses are going to be different enough that we generally are going to go to almost everything, but there's going to be a chance we're not going to do what we used to do,
Right.
And we're going to
Yeah.
be driving away, and then the public's
Yeah.
going to be upset.
Yeah.
They need to know that some things are just not going to happen anymore, and they're going to be upset, and they're going to be upset with us, and we get that. We're preparing ourselves for an onslaught of emails and phone calls.
Yeah.
You know, your deputy did nothing. That deputy found my daughter, who's a runaway, at another guy's house, and he left her. Well, he probably did because she said, "I'm not going with you." And
Don't
the
touch
law-
me.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the law says that there's no physical force in that situation. It's not a crime to be a runaway. But what happens if 2 weeks later she's found murdered?
Right.
There's going to be a lot of community angst.
Yeah.
You know, because
why didn't you take her out of this
yeah,
situation?
and in the end, you look at us.
Jeez.
Greg and I, our job is public safety. That's what we do on a daily basis. And we do it at the level that the community wants because we're part of the community.
Right.
I think
Exactly.
the left has succeeded in a lot of ways by demonizing police, and they talk about the police. The police. You know, and that gives you that image of a bunch of guys with big, tall boots marching down the street with billy clubs. Really is. Greg is completely integrated into his community with his kids
Right
going
on.
to school with other people, going to churches with other people. We are the community. We just have different jobs.
Right.
You guys have a job, we have a job.
Right on.
But they've separated us. And that is where they're getting their successes. And that's not cool because the impacts aren't to us. We'll just pull back. We get paid the same.
Right.
We're frustrated because we're not able to protect the community like we used to. But the community is the one that gets
Yeah.
the hits.
Yeah.
Lance, cancel that you and me marching in boots with batons thing you had scheduled for this weekend. I want you to maybe
Well,
cancel that.
I guess the bottom line is that you guys and gals are fighting against this, right? I mean, you want changes. This is not going to work.
But till then, you're going to do the
Yeah, but
very best
until
you
then, that's
can
right.
within the parameters
Absolutely.
that have been
Yep,
set
That's
for
right.
you.
Yep.
Still keep doing what we can the best.
Yep.
Yeah, we fully hope that after this takes effect, and we got 6 months of
Yeah.
of data to show that this isn't working, and that unfortunately people are going to die because of this. We're going to walk away from a suicidal subject. We're going to, somebody that should be ITA'd or the Involuntary Treatment Act is not going to be taken into custody, and then they're going to do something that is going to be tragic. That is going to occur somewhere in the state of Washington over the next 6 months. And we're hoping that once that data is there, once that evidence is there, that at least some moderate legislators will realize that this went too far.
Yeah.
And-
Unintended consequences, man, are always the bugaboo.
Dave, I'm going to challenge that. I don't think these were unintended, to be honest with you.
Yeah?
Because Washington Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs, when they saw the way these, especially 1310 and 1054 were written,
Yeah.
they went to some legislators and said, hey, there's some real problems with the way this is written. Please introduce this amendment. To soften the language here. And every one of those amendments were rejected.
Wow.
So they were put on notice that there were real life consequences that were going to occur because of this language, and they struck down those amendments.
Did it anyway.
So I don't think you can say that these are
Okay.
unintended consequences.
Yeah. They didn't want to hear from law enforcement, and they made that clear. We
Yeah.
are making these changes
Yeah.
whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
Well, we represent the community, and we're saying, hey, these are bad ideas. And they don't worry about it.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, we got this as legislators. Oh, yeah? Well, you're not going to be in the car. You're not going to have the people screaming at you. You're not going to have to come onto the scenes
right.
after, as you always say, are reactive to the situations instead of proactive situations. Have to clean up the mess and all of that. So, Well, guys, I tell you, we hold some of us, most of us, people around here especially, hold our law enforcement in higher esteem. We're not about the business of defunding police and demonizing police. We know the tough jobs that you do and how important you are to the community, and it's kind of a heartbreaker to see a situation where our guys do so much good, have them burdened by an outside perspective on law enforcement that doesn't reflect the realities of where we live and what we need you to do for us, right?
Yeah.
Well said.